What makes music Jewish? I'm not talking about something being Jewish music. Sometimes someone might say, that doesn't sound like Jewish music. In every generation, my sense that people often will take from popular culture, even if that means, 100 or 200 years ago, they didn't have influence from the Christians, church music. How does something considered Jewish music?
I met somebody years ago who said there's ruach hatula in some music.
Yeah. Sometimes you hear some of the music today, or some of the Jewish groups, the younger. Some of that, I feel like it sounds like it has too much of a beat. That sounds too, some of the things my kids listen to. It could be that my parents thought the same thing about when I was listening to MBD and Avril Reed, maybe I don't know. I mean, I don't think they thought as much. They listened to secular music. In every generation, there's some influence from the outside. Maybe not.
There's music today which
what? Maybe spill. Gotta get fought.
I'm in a bad spot here.
Handsome as ever, Rebbe.
What?
You're still as handsome as ever.
Yeah, right.
which was a generation ago, cutting edge rock. So it's been absorbed into our culture. Is there a problem with that?
So the question is, what makes music Jewish? I'll deliver myself of a personal bias. It's many years ago there was a young man who began to take an in. He was the child of survivors, and it was in the 60s when there were a lot of these young people who were on the college campuses protesting against Vietnam and protesting against their parents, the way their parents lived. It was an age of ferment on the college campus. What? You're one of them. How does that saying go? I resemble that. Yeah. So. Good morning. Harvey sitting there. Harvey. That some imaginary friend of somebody, and it's like, huh?
I shook me up when you said it.
So, and so it took a kind of a spiritual battle with him, and he began coming in, spending Shabbosim with us. Eventually, he did become a Baal Tshuva, and his children are from, and living in Monsey. And anyway, during this period of time when he was kind of in transition, he told me that he writes poetry, and he published some poetry. He wanted me to see, to read his poetry. So he brought me one of the books of poetry, and he was gifted. He expressed himself in was what certainly would be artistically or aesthetically very, very moving ways, but some of his imagery was explicitly sexual, and some of his language was he used profanities. So I said to him, you're obviously very gifted, and faithful to your, to the rules of your profession, which is to be expressive and effusive and with all to be as powerful and as descriptive as you can be. I said to him, but if it doesn't ennoble the reader, then it doesn't qualify for Jewish art. It's not Jewish poetry. In other words, the fact that somebody is Jewish, writes poetry, doesn't make it Jewish poetry. Jewish poetry, at least from my perspective, has to answer to the criteria of, does it ennoble the spirit? Does it inspire? If what it does is to describe reality, and sometimes reality is depressing, sometimes reality is ugly, and there are people who are able to depict that in ways which are very powerful, and they're lauded for the fact that they have that they're able to articulate things that powerfully, but to let people know how slimy the world is does not uplift anything. It doesn't ennoble the spirit. So I said to him, I would argue that if you want your poetry to be Jewish poetry, if you want it to be beautiful within the Jewish context, you have to ask yourself, what does this do to the reader? So, there's no question about the fact that our music, the music of every culture, the Jewish music of every culture, is affected by the culture. If you listen to Sephardic music, there's no question about the fact that there are striking similarities to the motifs of Arabic music. You know, the kind of music that you hear from Arab quarters does have striking similarities to the Sephardic nuschos, whether it's the nusach and davening or whether it's to their music. And I don't doubt that that the music of our generation has been influenced by the music of the Western culture. The question over here is, what do we feel when we hear the music? In other words, the Jewish music, supposedly quotes Jewish music, which has been impacted by the popular music. What do we feel? Now, sometimes I live on a fairly busy street in Milwaukee, so it's not uncommon that the cars that go by, especially during the summer months with their windows open and their music blaring, and conventionally, the Afro music has what you hear, because I think they beef up their speakers so that the bass comes out very strong. That's what you hear, right? You hear the beat, huh?
Put a subwoofer in the back.
I don't know what they do. But it's the whole our whole boulevard resounds to that beat. And so you don't even hear the melody. If there is a melody, you don't hear the melody, but you hear the beat. And to me, the beat is primitive. It's a beat that evokes something that's that it's not,
Aggressive.
huh?
It's aggressive almost.
It's animalistic. I think that's the word. It's animalistic. It just kind of brings out some kind of not violence in the sense of like, but that that kind of all that unrest, all that. What's the word, Ellie? What's the word I'm looking for? It's, what? It is. It's raw.
Like drives?
Huh?
Drives, basic drives.
It's driving. It's coarse. So when I come into a chasana, and I hear that beat going. And today the chasana, it's ridiculous. I mean, they have these speakers. It definitely affects our hearing.
Yeah.
Definitely affects our hearing. So, but it's
So they don't want people to speak Lashon Hara at the table.
right. It really, it makes it very difficult. So I find it offensive. And I don't think it's Jewish. I don't think it's Jewish. And it doesn't. I mean, the capacity to reflect, be reflective or introspective, or to yearn, or to be joyous in a kind of a buoyant way and in a grateful way. This is just kind of, it pumps up your heartbeat.
So if we take a very different example, Beethoven, Bach, and classical music doesn't have that kind of beat.
No.
You say that's Jewish music? I mean, they weren't Jewish.
It's not Jewish music, but I mean, then you'd have to ask yourself the question, which is a much more subtle question, which is, is there koyach hapoel benifal, so that if these people, like Wagner was that kind of music was
Bombastic.
It had Nazi, and it was celebrated in Nazi Germany. Wagner was celebrated in Nazi Germany. So, but whether it's Mozart or it's Tchaikovsky or it's Beethoven. Or Bach. There are some people who believe. There's one fellow in my community who insists that if you listen to Bach when you're learning Gemara, it will help you, because Bach's music is mathematical. It corresponds to logic.
There's research on this.
What?
There's research on this that supports the idea that
So it could be. I find that all music distracts me. I'm very, very drawn to music. So if there's music going on now and I'm learning, I'm listening to the music. So I can't do that. There are some people who feel that it really helps them learn.
Moshe has a tshuva regarding somebody who became a Rasha. They put out songs. So he says if depends when the song came, before or after. And the idea is it's the association that you make with the ruach that you're going to pick up from it, one or the other above. That is, so sometimes we associate music with, we're associating Wagner with Yimach Shemam, but if we didn't know that, maybe it wouldn't have the same effect.
Yes, I don't know, but then again, that's that very subtle question of Kayach HaPeil B'Nifal. Does the author of something, put some of his tuma into the product? So that's
Does the same apply to literature?
what?
The same apply to literature? In terms of the koach that they put into it, like for instance, when Muhammad wrote the Quran, there was, at the end of it, he was rabidly anti-Semitic. So you could read the Quran all you want, but not even the written message, but the koach of it is anti-Semitic.
That's ideas.
And it's not even the ideas, it's what his kavanah was when he wrote it. So does the reader, hundreds of years later,
He's going to pick up all that negativity, all of that anger and rage.
Midos.
What?
There's midos and hashkafas and language.
Yeah, and so by me, to answer David's question, I think the criterion should be: does it inspire? Does it ennoble? Does it create positive energy, or does it appeal to the coarse or the primitive or the animal?
How do we understand Acher? The Chazal say Acher was influenced by Greek music. How do we understand what they're saying?
The question was Elisha ben Abuya. Elisha ben Abuya was influenced by Chachmas Chitzonia, Sforim Chitzonian, Greek music. What?
There's also surely there's a question of the actual sort of beat. Let's say the beat, for instance. This beat, anything with this beat means it's basic or whatever. Or it's possible, seems more probable even, that different people and different generations, particularly, they're just made differently. They're wired differently. Down the street, they're exposed to different things, and so when I'm thinking of the beats, there are certain beats which to you, or maybe even to me, would be like offensive, partly to do with our own associations, partly to do with just where we are in our lives. Whereas to these kids, this is actually really important. If they don't have this, they're not going to relate to the music that we relate to. It won't actually get them excited and engaged and joyous. And this,
Okay, I can hear that.
From the outside, I'm just saying.
Right. It could be that in a generation such as ours, which has become fairly distant, both in time and in quality, from the well springs of Kedusha, that in order to be able to excite us, to kind of wake us out of our slumber or out of our schleppy, whatever it is, there's a good word for that somewhere.
Lethargy.
Huh?
Lethargy.
Lethargy. Yeah. What?
You talked about Bach before. Bach, I play Bach all the time. But Bach was a very religious man.
Right.
He was a Christian.
He was a religious Christian.
So is there a problem?
I don't think so. I know, it's people who've asked me that. I don't think so.
What about listening to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir? Singing Hallelujah.
I don't know, I have no idea. I've never heard that.
Huh?
As far as the different generations, so like we said, when we compare what's coming out today versus what came out, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, you'll hear differences. But if you also listen to, Yosel Rosenblatt, which is close to 100 years ago, that's even more different. And hearing a Chazanah's piece, that I think sounds more like classical music, let's say. So, if you'll say, well, this is influenced by the times, I'm going to guess that Yosel Rosenblatt was also influenced by what's around him. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm wondering if you listen to, I'm just still struggling with the idea of how to understand if something's Jewish or not. So you're saying if it inspires someone, that still sounds very vague.
That's kind of my definition. I mean, I can hear what Eli was saying, that that our generation, in a certain sense, has different needs in order to excite it.
But is there
they
something
used
more
to be.
Jewish about in Yom Naram, when we end of Avinu Malkeinu, that Avinu Malkeinu, I heard from musicologists, is one of the oldest Nigudot we have today. That and Eliyahu Hanavi, those two songs, and there's a couple of others, they're hundreds of years old. So is that more Jewish? That it's in the it's called it's
It's not a question of more Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably more nostalgia attached to it. I don't think it's more Jewish.
What about Chazanis sung by Chazanim who were Michal Shabbos?
Most of the Chazanim were not religious. Very few.
So is there a negative?
They used to say that Yosel Rosenblatt was an exception. When he asked for a lot of money, they said to him, "Why are you charging more money than other Chazanim?" He said, "I charge you for the stille Shmonesra, like the quiet Shmonesra." He said, the other of them don't say it. He said, "You're paying me because I say that I actually daven." So
does that debase? When I listen to that, I find it bothers me.
It bothers you?
Yeah, it bothers me.
Okay.
Are they debasing the kedusha?
A lot of holy people were very moved by their chazanas. Pinchik was not religious. The whole world is moved by his Rosa de Shabbos. It's a classic piece. Every chazan sings it. And anybody who has a voice sings Rosa de Shabbos, and it's moving. He's not a religious man. He used to come to Milwaukee to see my father. He was like a little bit of a devotee of my father. So I used to see him when he would come, but he was a bachelor. Never got married, and he wasn't from. There are Hasidic stories about tzaddikim who heard non-Jewish music, and they would, as it were, they would buy it. They would say, "Can I have your music?" And then the person supposedly would forget it, and then it became Jewish music. There's a lot of Hasidic music that came there.
What's the underlying analysis of how does that work?
My educated guess is that in Hasidus they would explain it with the fallen sparks. That there's holy music fell into the.
Chabad took the Marseillaise.
The what?
Chabad took the Marseillaise.
They have lots of stuff that I think. They have Napoleon's March.
They still, a lot of them are marches or even beer drinking songs or a lot of
Right.
But they, I heard from someone who heard from Chabad that only somebody on the Madrega It's because it's.
Could do that. Okay.
I was at a wedding in Borough Park, and like 3 or 4 of the songs I recognized because I was the only Baal Tshuva there. Were like 80s rock ballad songs. Like there was the music. I was laughing. So like my friend, what are you laughing? I'm like, this is like I remember this when I was a kid from like a heavy metal rock band.
It's always funny when
It's really funny.
when you're in a very, very warm wedding.
And they have no idea.
You know that no one else can possibly know what the song is. Otherwise they wouldn't be playing it. I think the way music works, in terms of moving oneself, and as you were saying, in terms of uplifting, is it's only uplifting through you, the listener, whoever you happen to be, and depending on who you are, that's how much you get uplifted by it. So it seems to me, Paul and Michel aside, and those, the spiritual part of it aside, at the end of the day, when you listen to a piece of music, if it moves you, it's because of you. It's because it's touched something in you. If you've got a chazan who's not Shem Shabbos, but he's singing tunes and words that are moving to you, it moves you because of you and the words. So it's not so much, it's not to do with him, it's to do with the words. And if he's gonna, and that's the problem with music nowadays, I think more than anything else, is the words and the associations of that. I can't even believe that we listen to it or allow people to listen to it in general just because of how it affects people on a subconscious level, lowering people's feelings. Sad songs as well. Like where's the place for sad songs? Do we want to get drawn into this codependent kind of?
So
They'd say that the appeal of Shlomo Carlebach's nigunim are the fact that there is a certain depressed quality, a very longing kind of thing of of being somehow estranged and yearning to be reconnected somehow, and that's what people identify with in his music. There is that kind of a dimension.
somewhat Rabbi in Lakewood, I said it for that reason.
Because of its
Could be.
depressive side? Because of its depressive side?
He was in Lakewood together with Haba. That was on.
Nothing depressing at Lakewood.
Lakewood is depressing.
I think the one caveat over here, we would hear from some of the people who were kind of Pesach or Shtei Asifim, people who would kind of like come to our community and enjoy what we were offering, and then they would go to the Reform and Reconstructionist services, and they would nosh over there a little bit. So, they would tell you that there was such a moving service, and the rabbi took out his guitar and on Shabbos and took out and closed the lights and he played, and the women put on talesim, and it was a very moving spiritual experience. And then they would talk about the fact that on Simchas Torah the women danced with the Torah, and it was such a spiritual experience. So, what does that word mean? That word spiritual. People would take LSD and they would have a spiritual experience. They would take these hallucinatory drugs and have a spiritual experience. So apparently almost anything which wasn't somehow directly connected to a physical excitation was considered spiritual. We would define spiritual as being something that corresponds to Hashem's Hashem's Ratzon. In other words, if the classic example is someone is doing couples therapy, and the wife says, I don't think he loves me. And he protests, the husband protests, how could she say that? I buy her diamonds, and I send her on cruises, and I buy her fur coats, and she says to him, I don't want diamonds, and I don't want cruises, and I don't want fur coats. I want you to spend time with me. You never spend any time with me. You're always in your office. You're always someplace else. So love is expressed in terms of what is meaningful to the person who supposedly is the beloved. Our definition of spiritual is what the Rebbeinu Shalom says is meaningful to him. So it's meaningful to him as Tirah Mitzvahs. The fact that a woman dances with a Sefer Torah or puts on a talis and feels an out-of-body experience may be just that, but that doesn't make it spiritual in our terms. The definition of spiritual is something which is a predicate of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu when it conforms to what he considers an expression of something that gives him a nachas ruach. So, what?
Maybe we need a different word for it because.
Right. Okay.
Because, what you're talking about, perhaps, and even this isn't quite the same thing as kedusha, right? Kedusha isn't spirituality.
Okay, but to us, when we say ruchnias, we are talking about kedusha.
Ruchnias is kedusha or something different?
We're talking about something which is the in a certain sense the conduit to kedusha. Ruchnias is not the out of body experience. It's not ecstasy. People can have ecstasy by taking ecstasy. It's it's a very popular drug, but that's our definition of ruchnias is something which has that predicate of kedusha associated with it, and I think that if we were to say about some of these experiences that people call spiritual, I think we would have to ask the question, how does it change you? In what way are you a better person because of that experience?
That doesn't solve anything.
What?
I wouldn't have thought that solves the problem.
You would not
I
have.
wouldn't have thought that solves the conundrum because I assume you wouldn't agree that just because someone's changed so someone goes to the shul, the reform shul, the female rabbi gets up, gives a very moving sermon, and this person comes out changed. I mean, is that still, through the davening, through the water, through the guitar, they literally come out changed?
Okay, so that would be certainly expressive of what you said, that it goes through the person, that the person has used the medium in a way which has uplifted them.
Would you call that spiritual?
I probably would call it spiritual. I would be hard pressed to figure out why.
When the Torah tells us that the Malkum fi Yefes is an Ohel Hashem, so it's giving us a gather over there of Ohel Hashem. How do we understand that gather?
So I don't know if you mind. I know I shared this with you before, that when Shem and Yefes went to cover their father's nakedness, that Shem was the instigator, Yefes was the associate. He was supportive, and they both went in, and they turned their heads away so that they would not see their father's shame. And Rashi quotes a Chazal that Yefes was rewarded with the mitzvah of talus, because he covered his father with this cloak.
Shem was talus, right?
Shame. Did I say the shame?
You said Yefes.
Shem was the talus, and Yefes was rewarded with the fact that at the end of time, by the Mechama of Gog and Magog, that the corpses of all of Yefes's descendants would be buried. So the question is, why the discrepancy here? Why the difference? So I remember I thought I explained it here, that, right, that Shem did it out of principle. He did it because there was a mitzvah to honor one's parent. So he did it out of essentially out of responding to a value, to an ideal. Yefes did it because it offended his sense of propriety, of beauty, so each one got.
It was mixed with etiquette.
What?
It was etiquette versus.
Right. It's you don't want to look at something that's gross. So they each got a reward which was consistent with their motive.
Which was the higher level?
Clearly,
He was offended by it, the fact that he wrote, he said, like, this is not within the confines of halacha, or he, like, this just offends me.
Right. So
Which is
it offended a sense of beauty. It wasn't. It offended him as opposed to offending his value system.
Oh, okay.
So each one got kind of something which was really a midah connected midah response.
In terms of this, like, at least in the vernacular, this holy versus spiritual, we have a mitzvah to be a holy nation.
Right.
That's what our Kohanim Gad Kadosh. We have a mitzvah to be a spiritual nation. And is there?
It's a good question. I don't think.
Were the others spiritual? The others were holy.
I don't remember the usage of the word ruchani. We do say the ruach kadshecha, we say, but there's also that we could do it ruach kadshecha tikach mimeni. Don't take the ruach, and there probably are expressions of ruach, but I don't know if they mean ruach in the way we use it, like ruchnius, spiritual. In any event, I think we need to be careful about the definition of spiritual, even when it's coming through people, and people say, and I was so terrific. I think Rabbi Michel talks about. It says that Vasa Shivcha al Hayom Mashal Leira Yechezkel ben Buzi. Yechezkel saw the Merkava, and the Shivcha al Hayom, when they were going through this, the simple handmaiden, or what do they call her, saw more than prophesized in a way that was great. So Chaim Shmulevitz said, so where is the nevuah of the Shifcha? Where we have the nevuah of the Cheskel. Where is the nevuah? So he said the problem is that if you don't work for something, if it's just it's a momentary gift. Huh?
They stayed a shifra. They didn't change.
Yeah, right. She was a shifra before. She ended up a shifra afterwards. So she saw a lot of things, but her kalim. I mean, where did it go? It was something that went into the person and left the person where they were, as opposed to Yechezkel, who worked very hard to be a worthy recipient of the thing. So I don't want to denigrate or dismiss the experience, but I think it violates the definition of spirituality from the tail standpoint. The spirituality from the tail standpoint is something that corresponds to what the Rabbi Michel says is are the terms of a relationship with him. So even if it's something that that makes kind of makes you feel out of body, or very you can do that with. And one of the criticisms that they say about Nadav and Avihu is that they went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim after they drank, because they understood correctly that in order to be with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you had to be in a very uplifted state. The difference is that in as much as the Rabbi Shalom is an absolute emes, that you have to go in with absolute emes. If the emes that you go in with, in other words, that inspired state is partly based on a foreign substance, so then the feeling is not real.
Even the word feeling, the word ruchani means non-physical. Gashmi is ruchani is non-physical. It's hard to explain because it's non-physical, but we know what it's not. A feeling is physical, by definition. That's what a feeling is. Every feeling is physical. You can't feel if you don't have a body.
You feel sad.
That's true. Every feeling.
That's a feeling. Sad's not a physical feeling.
It is. It absolutely is. Yes, it absolutely is. We relate to it as to a situation, but you cannot feel sad without a body and a feeling and have embodied feeling. In fact, that's one thing.
You can feel compassionate.
So what's your point, Dylan? Therefore, what's your point?
So what I'm saying is that when we, it's partly to do with the language and the words, but when you talk about spirituality, when you're talking about ruchaniyut, right? We're talking about non-physical things. So it's the non-physical aspect of something. It's nothing. As soon as we start talking about feeling a certain way, it's back to the physical. It could be connected to the spiritual. It could be connected to the thing that you're doing. It could be, and there's nothing wrong with feeling good. In fact, it's an essential part of doing stuff. And you're not going to, if you can't feel good doing good stuff, you're not going to do good stuff for very long. So the feelings are important, but the feelings themselves are never ruchani. The feelings themselves are always gashmi. They're always a physical thing.
Physical feelings.
How would you?
Rabbi Kasson spoke in recently about a yogi who achieves nirvana. So he's totally mevatel his physical, and he's in a state of supreme ecstasy, nirvana. And like the Rebbe said, that it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, connecting to Hashem. But I'm thinking the bittul of Yeshus is a big yesod. So they're similar, but in other words, to the extent that you can be mevatel the goof, so you can make yourself more of a kli, but that's not, I guess the bottom line is, being a kli doesn't mean that you're there. You've just done the hachana.
You remind me of an experiment was done. I'm out of school a very long time already. And this was a study which was done when I was still in this psych program. So, but the study was fascinating. What they did was they took people and they gave them a drink. They didn't tell them what was in the drink. It's a drink. And there was a stimulant in the drink. I don't know if it was caffeine or something more powerful, but there was a stimulant in the drink. Then they put them into rooms with people who were told to act in certain ways. So some people were told to act very pleasant and very positive, and all very like complimentary, very joyful, and others were told to act angry, and all kinds of some of the frustration and rage, and others were told to act very very sad and despondent. What they found was that that these people spent time with the individuals who were there to act out these different things, is that when people came out, they invariably had adopted the emotion of because they were stimulated, and they didn't have any reason to be stimulated other than the fact that they were physically stimulated, and they had nothing to attach it to. So they attached it to the emotion of the person who was in the room. So if the person who was in the room was pleasant and was positive, they came out feeling very positive. If the person in the room was sad, they came out because that's what they did with that stimulation. So what Ellie's suggesting over here about the fact that all of these things are feelings, and that the feelings are they're physical. It's very consistent with the fact that that when we're stimulated in some way, that there's invariably an emotion that goes with that.
It's also one of the things they say, if you have stage fright, so you're feeling extremely anxious before. Generally, people think, well, I shouldn't feel anxious. But actually, lots of the trainers say you actually being excited, being stimulated is actually very positive and powerful for your talk. So, and also it's very hard to go from stimulated to not stimulated. But if you change the meaning behind it, say I'm not anxious, I'm excited, right? It's the same physical feeling in your body, and yet the emotional experience of it and the comes from it.
The impact.
Different. So it comes back to the same idea. It's a feeling, and you can attach it to a different meaning, and suddenly it's something different.
I want to ask that, and I can identify with it. I want to ask an experienced public speaker. He said to him, whenever I get up to speak, I have butterflies in my stomach. Do you ever get over that? He said, no, you never get over that. He says, but eventually you learn how to teach those butterflies to fly in formation.
It's a fuel. It's a fuel.
Yeah. But the interesting thing about what Ellie just said was how the word that identifies the feeling changes the way in which it impacts on you. So if you say, I feel nervous or anxious, then you're feeling, in a certain sense, you're feeling negative. If you say, I feel excited, then you can use that in a positive way.
Reframing.
What?
They call it reframing.
Reframing, yeah.
Tony Robbins has a little take on this. He says,
Who?
Tony Robbins.
Yeah, right.
So he says, sometimes you say, I'm so angry, I'm furious, right? You know, and the word you use impacts how you feel and what you'll do. So he tried this new thing, which is he'll say, instead of I'm furious, he'll say I'm peeved. And he said, like, when he says peeved, he just can't say it. Being
What?
angry. The word peeved is just funny when you say it. It's like he says it, and it releases his anger. He's completely in a different place because he's just used that different word. He's not even changing it to excitement, but just using a different word to explain the anger. You know, try next time that you're angry with him.
I'm gonna laugh.
You're like, oh.
I'm really peeved.
I watched part of a Tony Robbins thing about, I don't know, 5-6 weeks ago. And I was very put off by the fact that he found it necessary to use a particular word many, many times. It was just, it was unnecessary. And
in the business, there's this idea of those words create impact in a way that other words wouldn't. I don't agree with it, but it's very. There's a whole group of people.
I don't know, but he used it so often that it became a banality.
Is he a comedian?
Huh? No, he happens to be a very powerful guy, and his stuff is good, but I can't watch it.
Okay, I see in the business world when I go back to the States. It's not because I see in the business world when I go back to the States and see if my customers Jewish, not Jewish. Some of them even observant. Profanity is just, not only is it accepted, it's pervasive. It bothers me when I go back there and I see it, but I'm in shock that people speak the way they speak in the positions that they're in. And you would think even somebody would run to human resources and say, this guy's speaking inappropriately.
I know someone who's